All right, I'm here with my special guest, Cheesy. What's up, Cheesy?
Not a whole lot, not a whole lot. Just enjoying this lovely, lovely afternoon with you, Muddy.
Yeah, it's gonna get maybe a little shitty with the weather everywhere, so we'll try and get this done. But if either one of us loses, you know, then we'll work off from that. So,
All right, sounds
um,
good.
yeah. So here we are, just done the Bill of Rights, and I asked some guests to come on and help me complete the rest of the amendments. So Cheese and I are going to tackle 11 through 15 today. And I'll start by reading Amendment 11 in 1795. So we're talking about slightly thereafter. It's still very young country. And you obviously see some holes and you say, hey, we got to fix some stuff. So, uh, Amendment 11, the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States citizens by another state or by citizens subject of any foreign state. And so what did we come up with this one? Uh because this
So,
one's a little unclear, a little muddy, but
so it's hard to grasp at first, but I mean, what it's trying to state here is that, well, in a way, it seems to be stating that uh, the state has the right to go to federal court when it needs to uh, possibly sue another state. A state can't just outright sue another state. So, like, Virginia can't sue New York in a Virginia court. It would have to go through a federal court. Or if it was a foreign state, they would still have to go through the same, I guess, mediation, would be correct. Um, but it is in a way to prevent the federal government, um, sort of remove federal government powers within the states as well. Something I pulled up says this amendment was intended to address concerns about federal interference in state affairs and maintain a balance of power between federal government and the states. Um, so a little bit difficult to grasp without the legal knowledge, but it is a good amendment
yeah,
for
it,
sure.
yeah, and it requires a little bit of extra context, but they wrote things differently back then, as we know. With shall not be infringed means make a lot of laws.
Right.
Um, so
To circumvent it for sure.
right. And federalism was the strong states and the weak centralized government, a Republican ideology today, was what the founders intended with their system of government. They wanted very strong states and kind of a mediator in the federal government. So they didn't want the overt power, the huge bureaucracy. They wanted states to handle things like abortion with Roe versus Wade, or like
Right.
different things, and they the federal government essentially resolved conflicts, like with Michigan and Ohio, when we got the Upper Peninsula and they got the Toledo Strip. So instead of fighting civil wars or breaking up the country during its early formation, amendments like this were vital in keeping the country united and giving it kind of a big brother vibe of, we're gonna let you guys play, but if anything gets out of hand, we're gonna take care of it. So
Right.
yeah, so I think that's a good explanation of the 11th. I think that as far as resolving states' rights, we're still doing that portion of it. I think when we get into the system of government that our framers intended, I think we've gone way far away from that.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
we,
Well,
yeah,
in a way, with our slight confusion at first with this specific amendment, I guess it goes to show that certain groups within our country and within our government are also confused, though maybe intentionally, as you stated before, in the event of trying to circumvent using the in somewhat vague language, using that as a way to circumvent the laws itself.
Right.
So something definitely to consider for the future.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that so it was very well written for the time and tackled a lot of problems that I don't know that we could make a document that was as robust as it is simple. Um, However, I think that when you have vagueness, you have attorneys and different political parties and different justices, and everybody has their own opinion or spin that they put on things. And eventually it gets so torn apart that it doesn't mean what it was intended to mean. So,
Right.
and I think that's the point where we're at now.
Oh, for sure. I think that's accurate.
All right. So we will move on to the 12th Amendment. 12th Amendment in 1804. This one, we'll just preface it by this is obviously in the Constitution. This is a furtherance of the constitutional standard of electing a president, vice president, so on and so forth. So the structure of government is further explained. So the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted as president and all persons voted for as vice president, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the president or of the United States, directed to the president of the Senate. The president of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president, and such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And if no person have such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states. Then the representation from each state having one vote, a quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. Uh, and if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president, whether the right choice shall devolve upon them before the 4th day of March next following, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of death or other constitutional disability of the president. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president, if such a number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list, the Senate shall choose the vice president. A quorum for the purposes shall consist of 2/3 of the whole number of senators, and a majority of the whole number shall be necessary to a right or to a choice. But no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States. Holy cow. Like, that is a lot of words.
Yeah, I have to take a sip of water after that one, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's pretty clear, but also a little bit terrifying if you've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
That if there were potentially a draw vote,
Mm-hmm.
that it would be up to the Congress to choose the next leader of the country. I
Yeah.
find that I find that especially nowadays to be exceedingly terrifying. So,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I did understand in regards to the Senate and the vice president. That makes sense. It's not as terrifying, but the Congress having the say is, again, terrifying. So,
Well, even back then, the Congress was the more, I'm looking for the word, demeaned branch of government. Like the senators were supposed to be, these upstanding, almost like American royalty, and the congressmen were just commoners, farmers, and things like that. So
right,
for them to choose the next president put an enormous amount of faith in the American people, which I think is lost today. It wouldn't be that way. It would be whoever could donate the most money quickly.
right. Well, I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, you can sort of see some things were borrowed from different uh, governments from that time, especially in the UK with you have Parliament, you have the House of the Lords. House of the
Mhm.
Lords being unelected, but similar to
Right.
the power of so I guess sort of to the power of the Senate. Um, but yeah, you've definitely seen some different opinions over the many years of what powers these groups could have, and especially their opinions on who should have the power to vote as well. I mean,
Right.
as we'll see with the upcoming amendment, certain people had less of a vote than another, and then there were opinions that people who had more money than another person should have more votes than another. So
Mhm.
there were many ideas of what who should have that power, and fortunately, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and one of those things is, so you have to have something, building a new framework with new ideas that are completely separate from anything that's ever been tried is just not feasible. You're going to draw from what you know. You're going to draw from, I mean, the ideal situation is you draw from the the British Parliament, but you improve upon it.
right,
And you take the good, you leave the bad, and you get improvement, and you get a better system. And
right.
I think that was their intention here. But it's impressive that they wanted to give that kind of power to the lay people, the farmers, and the this
Oh,
and that.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from a system where they didn't have as much say because certain governments that they would have grown up with and had been a part of, they had absolutely no say and
right.
absolutely no representation within uh, these groups of government. So you definitely see certainly see the idea of improving upon. Whereas in
Mhm.
the Senate, of course, every state has two representatives that go to the Senate and uh, vote on different things, of course, and then other what is the representation of the Congress is dependent upon the amount of people that inhabits a certain space within a state. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, I agree. I agree with you 100% that it was definitely the best improvement they could make for the time.
Uh, excuse me. Kind of off topic, but on topic. One of the things that has recently been floated to me by some of our non-American friends is America's too big, and I tend to kind of agree in part. The original representation was one representative for 30,000 people.
Right.
Now we're up to what, nearly a half a million per representative.
I believe that's correct, but I'm not familiar with this specific number.
Yeah, I think it's just slightly north of 450,000 people per representative, but um, there's no way that one representative can service a half million people or 400,000 people.
No,
Um,
absolutely not.
and it just makes them on a different political plane, or a different plane than than the commoner, and that was not the way our system was meant to be set up.
Right.
So,
Absolutely, and it makes it very difficult. I mean, we're stating this, or at least I'm stating this in the sense that they are doing things as was intended,
mhm,
which was to go to Washington to be a representative of those people and be
mhm,
the voice of those people. There's no way that one person can truly be the voice of 500,000 people.
no,
And we definitely see that today, especially in certain congressmen, not to be named, where they stated that they didn't care what their constituents had to state, as long as they made sure that they were within the law as how they perceived it. So,
yeah,
for example, you had a recent situation where they wanted to censor Representative Adam Schiff
mhm,
for his, in my opinion, definite wrongdoings that led to the Trump impeachment in Congress,
yeah,
which failed in the Senate. In my opinion, I guess, I mean, even for Clinton, that in my opinion should be a failed impeachment. Uh,
yeah,
but one of the representatives, at first there were 20, but they stated that it would be unconstitutional to levy a fine on a congressperson as a punishment.
hmm,
Now, I agree that the fine that they stated rel- was was high. I mean, I think it was $16 million. I
wow,
agree that it shouldn't have been 16, but there should have been something more than being what is no more than a slap on a wrist. A monetary fine would be appropriate, whether or not it's constitutional, especially when we have groups within the government who generally don't care about the Constitution as it is. Um, but I don't think that would have been as much of a sacrifice. I mean, if a congressperson is going to intentionally do wrong, maybe there should be some sort of penalty that goes. I mean, these people are making $170,000 a year. I mean,
yeah,
they could they maybe they don't have to do like sports level fines. But anyway, we're going into going to a territory I don't think you wanted to go. Uh, but yeah, so the point is that you do have these congressmen that are just like, oh well, my representation, my group is way too big. I can't listen to everybody, so I'm going to go with what I think is correct.
right,
Which it's understandable, but that's not what they are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be, you know, maybe they query their constituents on what should be done. But that's never the case. I don't think it ever really truly has been though. But
right.
in a perfect world,
Yeah, in a perfect world, but yeah, we're definitely not going to get that. And then you look at, I agree, the punishments for what he did to a sitting U.S. president. Like, there has to be a stronger punishment than censure. Like,
oh for sure. I mean, what he did, I think, when reviewing sedition law, I believe it does have elements that would meet the requirements to have that charge. But I mean, that's probably never going to happen. Not with how things have been. So
no,
sadly, he has been censored. Again, a censorship within the Congress is merely a slap on the wrist. It's just like, tut tut, you shouldn't have done that. That was bad, and then moving
right,
on.
right.
Um,
He should have
so
at
that
least been expelled. At least been expelled
oh
from
oh
Congress.
for sure. I mean, at the very least, I mean, what he did was technically, in my opinion, a crime.
Yeah,
And I mean,
a,
to go
a
so
high
weak,
crime. Yeah,
right? So to go so weak on that behavior is a disservice to everyone. I mean, and this is not if a Republican. I mean, I hate to go to like, well, if it was the other side,
if
but
he
I
was
mean, I would
Ford,
feel the same way if it were a independent or Republican. I mean, if you're going to commit egregious, I'll just say for now, potential crimes, it doesn't matter who you are, right? So like,
Right.
well, I was going to go into something else, but I won't do that. I was going to go into other crimes that have known to have been committed by certain politicians that were rightfully gone after. And usually this is at the state level. You don't see it so much within Congress.
Right.
But anyway, I think that's enough
Yeah,
talking on that subject. We should move on to the
we
next.
got far enough on the weeds. So the 13th Amendment. So the third. So again, this essentially sets up the Electoral College in the briefness of, you know. But Amendment 12, Amendment 13, 1865. Did you want to read it in that previous voice?
Should I do it in the 50s voice, or at least my attempt of it? Sure. Section 1, neither oh god, that's not even it. That's a different one.
Yeah.
Let me try. Sorry, let me try this again. Section 1, neither slave. God, I don't want to do that one. Yeah. It's, now that I'm put on the spot, I'm just not
You
going to
just
be
can't
able
do
to.
it.
You know what?
Performance
I'll.
anxiety.
Yeah. Yep. And
Yeah.
it's not just in speaking, but Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So this one, pretty straightforward. It was just after the conclusion of the Civil War, though if you come from a historical side of it didn't truly end then. But digress. So this was the end of slavery. This was to, well, I mean, I don't know how much more to go on that. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And those who know history know that the Civil War was not fought only over slavery. It was more of a states' rights issue. But yeah. So yeah, slavery.
Better watch out. You might get hit with the rights to what? But no, absolutely. It was so much more than just slavery. Slavery was obviously a large part of it, a large part of why the states were fighting, but it was also an issue that they had with the Electoral College.
Yeah.
They felt that the South, that is, felt that they did not have the ability to elect a president that would be representative of what they wanted. Excuse me. I think that they felt that they had lost the election that led to uh, President Lincoln's his election.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Well,
blanking on the other things,
no.
but yeah, no, that was probably one of the other main issues. There was something as well as to trade, but at the moment I'm blanking on what that was. I wasn't prepared for this one. Yeah.
No, that's totally fine. We don't need to go into the Civil War, but yeah.
Yeah,
So this
that's a bit of a tangent. Back at Bull's Run, and then Gettysburg. Wow, whew, tough one that one was.
maybe someday, but not today. So
Yeah.
yeah, 13th was slavery. So
All right, 14th.
14th Amendment, 1868, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Section 2. I think this one's the long one, right? Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding my people, the Indians, not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the superseded Section 3 of the 20th Amendment. What?
Uh,
We'll get to that later. Executive and judicial officers of a state or the members of the legislature thereof is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age. This is what you were telling me, and I didn't listen. And citizens of the United States are in any way abridged except for participation in rebellion or other crime. The basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age. In such state, Section 3, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any other state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of the state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. The validity of public debt in the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in the aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. Jeez. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So this one's wrapping up the whole states' rights, slavery, and other issues
right. That they
in relation to the
experienced.
Civil War. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, they experienced a lot of issues between that 1965 to now 1865 to 1868.
Mhm.
So as those problems came along, they're just like, all right, new amendment. It's going to cover a lot.
Yeah.
So, um, and I think section 4 is in regards to, I believe it was Alabama. It might have been Mississippi, but one of those states had essentially restarted slavery but used a different name. And they used sort of the claim that these n- not slaves with quote marks had debts that needed to be paid
Indentured
off.
servants. Yeah.
Exactly. They basically used them as indentured servants.
Mhm.
So that's just an example as to why they felt it was necessary to implement this amendment, or at least this section portion of the amendment. There's so much more that happened in that small period of time that was relevant to the creation of this amendment. Um, so that's just one section. There's 5 second sections to, as you saw within section 2 and section 3, mostly section 3. Um, they were trying to figure out what they should do regarding Southern state congressmen, uh,
Mhm.
senators from those states that were part of the rebellion, what to do with them. Should they still be able to serve?
Right.
Um, so, as you can see, they're just like, no. They allowed those who were already in power to maintain their positions, but after it was over, I don't believe they were able to run for re-election after this specific amendment.
Right.
Um,
Unless they got the vote of 2/3 of each house to remove it. So
right.
I know there was,
There
I
were a
believe there's
couple.
at least one senator that
Yeah.
was. So
Uh,
uh,
Again, I'm
so it
blanking on
happened.
which one, but I know what you're talking about. I just can't place the
I
name.
can't remember
But
it
I
right
do
off the
know
top of my
that
head.
after there were some generals, so I think some Southern generals that eventually ran. So
Yeah.
and this actually is, I mean, I know this is a topic for another time, but this sort of goes into why it was wrong for them to rename a lot of these bases. There's a very good reason as to why they left those uh, military bases to keep the name of Southern generals.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why they sort of left in these amendments the ability to continue to extend that olive branch to previous rebellious politicians and military officers. So they definitely tried, but they struggled for a long time, leading up to the world wars.
Yeah, and it was never. It was supposed to be, if the government doesn't redress your grievances, it's your duty to rebel. Like, that's your duty. They set it
Right,
up where if we get too far away, then it's your duty to rebel against the state to fix the grievances.
right.
And so,
So if you want to get into the conversation, which I know is a no for now, but
mhm,
as to the opinions of whether or not the South had the legal right to make these protests, really, whether it went to the Supreme Court or if they protested within Congress and the Senate.
mhm,
There's people who in some ways I do agree with that they absolutely had the right to do what they did,
mhm,
um, based under the law of the time.
yeah,
So you could say that the North might have been an aggressor.
overbearing,
So I mean that
aggressor.
comes from the perspective. I mean, yes, slavery is wrong.
Mhm,
We don't agree with slavery in the Western world, though it does still occur to this day, uh, hugely ignored. But
well, it did occur. Sorry to cut you off. It did occur in the North at the time as well, just not as, it wasn't as public, and it occurred in both the North and the South. Racial discrimination and slavery occurred all the way up until the 90s.
uh, so so it's a yes and no type of thing.
Yeah,
There
I
are
mean,
certain local state governments again that since it wasn't something that was addressed by the Constitution, it became a states' right issue, which is
mhm,
why the Civil War eventually did occur. So there were states in the North that did abolish it earlier on, and
right,
there wasn't a was a bill that had gone through. I'm blanking on the name of it, but uh, they had written a bill that all land, I think west of the Mississippi, that
mhm,
would be acquired, any land past the Mississippi, it was uh, illegal to have slaves there. So they had
mhm,
prepared for the outward expansion, the creation of new states, and laid down law. And this was before the Civil War occurred. So
right,
it was very, very possible that it was another factor for what would eventually happen. So they saw what was going down. They knew that slavery was very important for their economy. Um, and again, what happened happened.
right.
So
And I meant 1890s, by the way. Not.
yeah, no, we keep saying 1990s, but it's
Well, I
yeah.
just said
Hopefully, people
90s, and I
understand
meant.
that this is is uh, is just a slip of the late 80s and 90s kids.
Yeah, yeah. I was in the late 90s. Um. So yeah, a lot in there, but I think this one can be summed up in wrapping up the Civil War stuff. Um, and then our last one, buddy, Amendment
15.
15, 1870. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Um, this is another wrap up of the Civil War and what came out of it, and this is um, Africans had the right to vote. Um, African Americans, had the right to vote in elections. Notably, women didn't. Still, we're still 4 amendments away from that, but yeah, uh, this gave blacks and previous slaves the opportunity and chance to vote. So,
Right. I think it
uh,
was so yeah, it was 5 so yeah, 5 years uh after the ending of the Civil War where they're just like, yeah, well, we freed the slaves, but hey, you know what? We missed something. They probably should be able to vote.
right.
Now, again, this as most people know, this wasn't the end of this specific topic
Mm-hmm.
because even though they were allowed to vote, uh, I don't think it does it specify it here. I don't think it does. But
No, I believe this led to the Three-Fifths Compromise, right?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yep. So that would have been a bill. But yeah, so yeah, that's where I was going to. That though they did allow uh, African American freed slaves to vote, they didn't have a full vote.
Mhm.
Uh, they voted as their votes counted as 3/5. So
And and that wasn't intended to be racist. That was intended. Well, I mean, of course it was, but it was intended to give both the North and the South equal representation because there were far more people after the freed slaves,
right.
where the balance of power was way out of whack. I believe it was the former Union or the northern states that actually proposed the three-fifth compromise, or is that incorrect?
Well, I
I
don't
don't.
know. I would have to look into that a little bit more because you would think
I think it's
I mean, I'm sure
con-
they were absolutely not concerned about optics at the time, but I think if that were to happen now, uh, the optics, and again, going as with it, we know what they would do now, but if if it had the same optics as today as it did then, you would think that they would say, all right, well, you participated in the rebellion, though will not will not go after you legally. Will you will have a reduced vote, so they
okay.
would go
So
after the slaves, and because in a sense it's almost a punishment
right.
when you think about it. So I mean
Um.
that's something I would have pushed, but then again, I was born many years later.
Right.
So
Like four.
yeah,
So
4 years later.
so I was right. So it was James Wilson of the state, and this is from the University of Houston. After a quick Google, state of Pennsylvania, who proposed the three-fifth compromise, uh, as a way to gain Southern support. So the North and the South could not agree on how slaves would be counted. It was decided that every five slave would count as three people for taxation and representation purposes. So,
Okay,
um,
well, I mean uh, that's interesting to hear because that absolutely dispels the racism.
right,
Uh, that almost makes the because I've heard so many times where it's just like, oh yeah, maybe it was racism from groups for many years about this as being a racist thing. But yeah, now that you read about, now that I've had time to actually think about it from that context, it doesn't seem to be racist at all. It was a temporary thing that they didn't know what to do. Um,
right.
So it makes 100% sense. But anyway,
So southern states had wanted representation apportioned by population. The Virginia plan was rejected because it would give the South a major advantage. The three-fifths compromise seemed to guarantee that the South would strongly represented, but would not have a disproportionate power in electing the president.
Yep.
So that's why it was, and that's this is from University of Houston.edu, and I know I'm not sharing it, but because that would be a pain in the ass, but I'm reading it directly off. So,
well, I believe you, Meaty.
I wouldn't believe you. That would be
I
my
believe
own.
that you're telling the truth.
So, well,
Well, just think about it. That was a genius. Uh, it was a genius way to solve that issue, though again temporary.
right.
And it's so shocking to hear such intelligent legislating from a state which has now elected a person who can't talk and can't think properly. So
Lurch, you mean? Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well,
and there's
let
a
me ask you this real quick.
yeah. Mhm.
I know this has been a very fun discussion, but I would love to end, if possible, with a quick reading of Amendment 16, 16th Amendment. I
Absolutely.
believe that this will leave off on a high note.
Well,
Um,
before we get to that, because
sure.
I'll let you do 16, but next,
Perfect.
um, before we get to that, so there was a 20-year expiration supposedly on the three-fifths compromise. So it's only supposed to be for 20 years until populations began moving. So
Right.
it's after the second census that it would be abolished in its own right. So it wasn't racist. It was just trying to make shit fair. So
Right. All right. So again, we'll end off with this one. I wanted to end with a high note. So Amendment 16, the 16th Amendment, introduced and I guess ratified in 1913. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So, again, pretty straightforward. The Congress has the ability to tax you on whatever the heck they want to. So, and guess what? They use this amendment so well. I mean, I
yeah,
don't think there's a day that goes by that they don't think about, how much they love the 16th Amendment.
right.
You know,
Well,
it get, it gets them their boats, it gets them
mhm,
their mansions and wherever the heck they live. It's a wonderful amendment.
yeah. Well, and it's so counter to what it was supposed to be because it was supposed to be limits on government, not expansion of power. And I believe 16 is where we started really seeing that
Well,
kind of
here
change.
comes
So,
here comes a fun reason to bring this up. So,
mhm.
what is important about the year 1913? Why was it important for the Congress to have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without the apportionment among several states and without regard to any census or enumeration? This actually goes back to a conversation we were having earlier. So, what came about in 1913?
The Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve. So, the Federal Reserve was implemented, and I think that's where we should leave it off because that's a whole nother conversation. Do your own research, people.
So there were reasons behind that, and that will probably be a spicy
That
subject
is
coming up.
exactly the reason behind the 16th Amendment.
Yep, they needed to fund their new programs. Um, and we see taxes increasing during the New Deal time. We see them increasing anytime that there's a major change to monetary policy, leaving the gold standard, all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, there's a lot behind the money. Money drives all evils, even this,
Absolutely.
even the U.S. Congress. So, well, Cheesy, it has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you jumping on and
Yeah, appreciate you
and doing
inviting
this
me.
with me. So it was
We
fun.
should do it again
and
sometime.
yeah, we should. We should.
In my
for
understanding, there's a couple more amendments, like 1 or 2.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's 11 left.
We're on 16. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
That's
we have
correct.
11 left. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, buddy, and I'm gonna end it
Absolutely.
here. I will catch you later, sir.
All right, sir. Hopefully, everyone has enjoyed this and has learned 1 or 2 things, or maybe been interested to look into, um, offshoot research of things that we've talked about. It's highly encouraged.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, sir.